Welcome back to Film Music Fridays. It's been a while. We're going to take a look at two scenes from the 2001 picture, The Lord of the Rings, the first installment, The Fellowship of the Ring from 2001, directed by the great Peter Jackson and music composed by Howard Shore. This is an incredibly cool score. The two scenes we're going to take a look at today are both very, very powerful, but kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. So let's start with the first one. We'll talk a little bit first about just the overall orchestration of this score. It's massive, from the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring to the very end of The Return of the King. And it was recorded with a 100-plus piece orchestra. And it's not just the sheer size that makes the sound as big and thick as it is. We've got a lot of really interesting instruments, from the raita to, shackling chains being slammed on the piano, bum, 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 bum. A lot of the music you hear during the orc sequences. This first scene we'll take a look at is Arwen taking Frodo to safety, or attempting to get him to safety, being chased by the Black Riders. And one of the things harmonically that sets apart these three scores composed by Howard Shore, and certainly the first one where we got these sounds for the first time, is kind of the collection or the stacking of diatonic notes in the scale on top of one another to create this constant sets of clusters separated by otherwise very kind of free single line tunes. So we'll talk a bit about that in a moment. So this first scene, as I said, Arwen being chased by the Black Riders. I love this scene a lot. One of my favorite things about it is how it speaks to the emotional content of the character, and it reminds me of a story that many years ago Jerry Goldsmith shared with me, maybe about 2 or 3 years before his tragic passing of cancer. And that is that your job as a composer is not to score the rider or to score what you see as the rider on the horse. Your job is to score the fear of the rider. And Howard Shore does this so eloquently in this scene. So as you'll hear these giant massive sounds, the horn section playing the melody on its own, these beautiful shots from a cinematography standpoint. I love when you finally get that super wide shot with all of the Black Riders chasing Arwen across the landscape. And some of these close-up and medium shots are accompanied with some very powerful music. So much of what you hear are kind of minor scales, with notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or notes 1, 2, 3, 4 of the scale, all kind of modally crunched on top of one another. And that first time you hear the chorus, which is one of the great elements of all three of these scores from the Lord of the Rings franchise, comes at that first close-up of the Black Rider. So let's see and hear what Howard Shore did here. Let's see what Peter Jackson did here. And the scene ends just as they're coming to the river, and you all know what happens there. So we'll see you in a moment. As you all heard there, an incredibly powerful scene. We'll pivot to an equally powerful scene here, although on the opposite kind of side of the spectrum emotionally, kind of filled with great tragedy and morose kind of tension this great sadness. This is, of course, the scene where we lose Gandalf. You shall not pass.
You shall not pass!
But we'll talk a bit about what's happening here harmonically once we get into this beautiful little chorale. It's set in F minor. You hear F minor to D flat major, and we have this beautiful mezzo-soprano solo here. Well, it's sung as a boy soprano in the film, but let's pivot just a little bit to the live version of these concerts, the live to picture. I had the pleasure about 7 or 8 years ago now, of conducting many dozens of these around the world. And so I had the great pleasure of being able to really understand and learn this music from the inside out with the scores. And this is one of those moments where it sounds easy, but to catch this very naked and lonely A flat above the register, above the staff in the treble clef, just out of nowhere, is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And one of the challenges of this score is getting the balance right, is constantly the balance. And how do you balance these tetrachords, these quintachords all over the place? Sometimes you get 4 notes clustered together in the basses, mixed with 4 notes clustered together in the chorus, and then another 5 notes clustered together in the brass. So it's constantly a challenge for balance, but otherwise the results when it's truly realized are incredible. So let's have a listen and a look to this scene. We'll pick up right as Gandalf is hanging on for dear life, and he screams out, well, it's an interesting story. In the theatrical version, he says, "Run, you fools." In every release, DVD, Blu-ray, after the theatricals, I understand it, they changed it to "Fly, you fools." And there's some back and forth conversation on why they did that, but that's an interesting little tidbit here. So let's have a listen to this incredibly beautiful music here composed by Howard Shore. I'm sure all of you have seen this movie. If you haven't, go watch it again. Spend 3.5 hours. It's worth it, I promise, as you all know. So we'll see you next time for Film Music Fridays. Until then, stay safe and healthy.
Fly, you fools!